Cemetery and the Board of Managers, it is my true pleasure to welcome all of you to this historic event. If you'd be kind enough to rise and stay standing.
Sergeant, post your colors.
Color guard, post. Post.
I'd like you all to join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order.
We've gathered here this day and this place with the history of our country and even more specifically the history of our city of Springfield, Illinois. On this solemn occasion, I think the words of the prophet Isaiah ring true. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is an everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Even youths will faint and be weary, and the young will fall exhausted. But those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all.
It's now my pleasure to introduce one extraordinary man whom most of us have come to know and to love. He is the director of Oak Ridge Cemetery. That would be Michael Lillis.
Thank you, Dave. You may be seated. This is going to be about a 20-minute speech. Just kidding. Well, first of all, welcome to Oak Ridge Cemetery and this historic occasion, the unveiling of Interment Book 1, which not only holds interment details for many of Springfield's notable residents, but also those of our beloved 16th President, Abraham Lincoln. In the year 1865, on or about this very same day, on May 4th, the first sexton of Oak Ridge Cemetery, George Willis, at probably this exact location, entered into Book 1 the handwritten interment details for the remains of President Abraham Lincoln. Date, May 4th, 1865. Cause of death, assassination. Location, receiving vault. Birthplace, Kentucky. I arrived as the 18th sexton, or in today's terms, director of Oak Ridge in October of 2011, and in my first days here discovered that we held some most treasured documents, the interment records of Abraham and Mary Lincoln, which rightfully would be so, as cemeteries are the owners and caretakers of all their own interment records in perpetuity. However, though, to my dismay, I found books 1 and 2 in a cabinet in our vault, disassembled from their binding because of having been digitized by a state agency, and in extreme poor condition. As time passed and the books remained in the cabinets, I felt it was my duty to pursue their restoration and preservation, and approached our foundation and our board of managers to assist with such endeavor. You will learn from our following speakers how the restoration and preservation process took place and how these national treasures will be preserved and retained for future generations to view and enjoy. Thank you so much for attending and being a witness to the upcoming unveiling of Book 1, Springfield's National Treasure, by Mayor Langfelder. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. I would now like to invite the President of the Board of Managers, Mitch Murdock, to speak.
Thank you, Katie. I appreciate that. Mike, thank you for everything you do for the board, for the city, for the cemetery. Thank you. What I'm going to do is briefly give you a timeline of how this appeared with the board and how we got to where we are today. So early in 2016, the Board of Managers of Oak Ridge Cemetery were apprised more fully of the Interment Books 1 and 2 and the condition of those books. At this time, the books were stored in an archival box, and the books were over 150 years old, having been inscribed on April 4th, 1865. As to the condition, the books had been digitized in September of 2003, by the Archives Department of the Illinois Secretary of State. Unfortunately, the books had been taken apart to be copied, and it had to be done in a flat manner, so those had to be laid out. And also, unfortunately, the books were returned to Oak Ridge Cemetery in the same manner, unbound and apart. Again, in early 2016, the Board of Managers and the Oak Ridge Director began a search to locate a company with the expertise, ability, track record to preserve, compile, and restore the books to a condition as near to the original as possible. Shortly thereafter, the mayor's office confirmed that the funding had been secured in the amount of $40,000 for the conservation of the books and the necessary security case for preservation. At that time, we immediately notified Graphic Conservation to begin restoration. And so, here we are on April 4th, 2018, exactly 153 years from the date of the entry into the Book 1, the record of interment of Abraham and Willie Lincoln at this location in the original office of the Oak Ridge Cemetery, which was right here. Thank you.
As Mitch told you, we are really graced with the presence of the man who has lovingly restored these books. And I'm really very grateful to him myself. His name is Russ Maki. His company is Graphic Conservation Company out of Chicago. It's all yours.
Well, thank you. It's kind of interesting in that occasionally in our world we end up being involved with having serious discussions with our clients about how to be custodians for what they have. As a conservation lab, which I'm sure most of you don't even know exists, candidly, our work is in works on paper. That's all we do day in and day out, is the conservation, restoration, and preservation of works on paper. It comes in a lot of forms. There's an awful lot of fine art that we see. Increasingly, probably due to Ancestry.com and the like, we're seeing a lot of family documents come our way. Original immigration documents through Ellis Island and great-grandparents' marriage licenses and things that connect people with their past. And then, in addition to that, the historically important documents, items that reflect our nation's history. We're also very involved with those. What's interesting is that now, since we live in this cyberspace world, the way that events are documented and memorialized is through Facebook, and Snapchat and YouTube and email and other forms of electronic correspondence, which to me just places an added level of significance to items such as these. These are extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And we're hopeful that as generations continue to pass, that people realize the importance of the original documents, which is what we have here. So volume 1 of the Oak Ridge Cemetery Interment Register meticulously notes the arrival of individuals throughout an 18-year period. This was accomplished through pen and ink handwriting that showcased impeccable cursive penmanship, which noted the individual's name, date, cause of death, and other pertinent information. Importantly, page 22 notes the arrival of our 16th president and his son at their final resting place. Don't worry, I know the whole speech. So, just on a personal note, the cursive penmanship, I personally am on a mission to teach our 5 grandchildren what cursive penmanship is. That's not an easy thing to do. As you may imagine, the preservation of American history is a significant portion of what we do at Graphic Conservation Company, American presidential history in particular. I would venture to say most, if not all, of the president's documents in one form or another have come through our lab. It's great to be in the state of Illinois where we have such a rich collection of presidential materials to work with. President Lincoln, in his lifetime, was an extraordinarily prolific handwriter. There was an awful lot of documentation that he provided, and historians and students and conservators get a chance to see that on a very frequent basis, which is wonderful. You know, we're fortunate to have earned the opportunity to assist institutions, individuals in these kinds of projects, and in this case particularly, not only does it lend historic significance to a story, it illustrates that story quite nicely, but it also provides context, which is a big part of what we look at as well. There's a lot to this story. There are the entries before the president's arrival, and there are entries after the president's arrival. There's an awful lot in these registers, as you may imagine. But in this case, it was very clear that proper conservation care and long-term storage considerations were very important factors. As was noted, this is 153 years old. It had served to obviously educate people about the fact that the president's body was here, and as a result of that, a lot of people had leafed through this over that period of time. A lot of damage occurred, particularly to the first 20 or 30 pages as a result of that. It's just kind of natural. The leather binding itself was deteriorating, and it generally, as I said, suffered from an awful lot of handling. On a side note, we had uncovered in a paste down sheet on the inside front cover, once that was removed, there was some actual handwriting on there that probably hadn't been seen in 100+ years. So it'll be interesting for scholars to research what the names of those individuals are and who they were, and there are some numbers there as well. So it was, you know, with a lot of projects like this, you'll run into something that you didn't expect. That we did not expect. It's also interesting to note that this book, as I mentioned, contains a lot of information about the individuals, the cause of death, and what you don't think about today are what life in the 19th century was like. The health hazards and the occupational risks that people went through in their everyday lives is unbelievable. The number of 9-year-old children that are noted in this register who lost their lives to measles, for instance. It's really a very sad story, and it's page after page after page. So life in the 19th century wasn't necessarily all great. So just in closing on my end, the team at Graphic Conservation Company is thrilled to have been entrusted with the opportunity to preserve a very important piece of the state's history. I will echo the comment earlier, it is a treasure. It's extraordinary, and the post-treatment recommendations that we provided in terms of looking out towards future generations and their ability to enjoy it, and the methods that were used, which are all reversible, so that 50 years from now, 100 years from now, should a better method be around, that can be applied. You know, that's a big part of what we do is creating things, creating our work with those considerations in mind. And I think at the end of the day, for us, more than anything, it reminds me very specifically of the team at Graphic and most importantly, why we do what we do. When you get the opportunity to work on an item such as this, it's something you don't forget. It's an extraordinary achievement, and it's meaningful. It's meaningful not only to us, but to thousands of people that are going to get a chance to experience this in a more public setting, which we think is a fabulous thing. That's what it's all about. So again, it reminded us greatly of the importance of the work that we do, which in a nutshell is the preservation of our cultural heritage. And this is an extraordinary example of that. So thank you to the board, thank you to the city, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you.
He did good. And I really do want to thank him. He has brought back to Oak Ridge an extraordinary artifact. And he did a good job. He did. The next individual that I want to introduce to you is a good friend. He is a good friend to everyone that lives in this city. And we all need to remember that. The tent and many things around us today are because of his thoughtfulness. And that is my dear friend, P.J. Staab.
With gratitude, we recognize the diligence and fortitude of the director and board of managers here at Oak Ridge Cemetery who have carried this noble cause to a celebratory event here today. Today, we have reintroduced a historic place of entry for cemetery visitors, as well as a record-keeping ledger for interments, the bell tower, and is what has now become a national treasure, Interment Book Number 1. What basic principles are there to learn then of the surroundings of this event today? Never underestimate the ability of a person who seeks to do the right thing. Thank you, Katie Spindell. Never again underestimate the ability and purpose of a group of volunteers seeking to do the right thing for whom they serve. Thank you, Mitch Murdock, President, and the Board of Managers. Always motivate those we surround ourselves with, for it is through these people's efforts we measure true success. Thank you, Director Michael Ellis, and the entire workforce of Oak Ridge Cemetery, Abraham Lincoln's final place of honor. Names that we may not know, but I see every day: Jeff Moffitt, Tanya Browner, Michael Lozier, Eric Entwistle, Kurt Wilson, Martell Beard, Matt Farrell, Max Favreau, Riley Sweska. These are the grounds. These grounds that we stand upon are manicured by them weekly and serving the people of Springfield and Sangamon County as they come out to select cemeteries property to be here with the president. Most notably, I recognize the wisdom in validating the efforts of those aforementioned by providing funding for the restoration of Interment Books 1 and 2. Thank you, Mayor Jim Langfelder. The unveiling event program you have here today is a keepsake. There is a ceremonial souvenir brochure that also is available at the reception following here today. You see, we truly sum up today's experience by understanding the real meaning behind the words attributed to Abraham Lincoln. We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. ask this one question. With those U.S. service members who have died and those who continue to endure the horror of battle for you and me, truly appreciate how we treat each other today? Our veterans, including Lincoln, deserve our attention, to conduct our every action to make them proud that they have served this great nation. They earned it. We owe it. We all should do the best we can without seeking fanfare for the glory of self, but rather in a submissive service to others. In closing, I leave you with some thoughts about the veterans that had the Abraham Lincoln hearse reverse engineered. And it's not about the hearse, I soon came to understand. It's about the Veterans Build Team story. And a quotation penned December 25th, 2015 continues to validate why we are here today. You see, the spirit of Abraham Lincoln, the spirit and legacy of Abraham Lincoln, some say inspired by God, was reborn through the passion and dedication of this Veterans Build Team. We came to realize that this build process was much like life itself. The team found themselves at the crossroads of good and evil, integrity and lack of integrity many times. By accepting the imperfections of humanity, we overcame with resolve to proudly proclaim the Abraham Lincoln hearse our nation's icon of freedom, and it's because of the veterans. I humbly request as we leave here today that we treat others with deference while seeking peace, and we thank you.
It's a classic example of be careful who your friends are. They sometimes surprise you in the strangest places. It is now my pleasure to introduce and have speak to you the Honorable James O. Langfelder. Keynote on Honorable.
Thank you, Katie. Katie and I actually first met when I was treasurer during these. I'm not going to go down that road, but she was a key, really a key advocate for coordinating the 150th commemoration of Lincoln's burial, and you did a phenomenal job with that, bringing groups together. And I want to do a few introductions before I say a few words. I can't do it alone. It's really the citizens' support, as importantly as the city council members that are here, as well as those that couldn't make it. And then one individual that really has passion and servant leadership, and that's what Lincoln was all about, is that legacy of servant leadership. And that's former Alderman Bob Vos. As you drive in here, he was one that really re-pronounced the Monument Avenue. And it was his good efforts. I remember I was in banking when he approached me about making a contribution, and he just made that happen. So it's really the efforts of what was announced here today, the foundation, Oak Ridge Cemetery Foundation Board, the Oak Ridge board members, really people coming together on a volunteer basis really reflect Lincoln's legacy. Because what it comes down to is any community, what we try to do is really create and enhance the experience, and that's what we're here to do today, and have a complete picture of what has transpired and how we move to the future together. But again, I'd be remiss if I don't thank the Staab family and all your good works, just not only today, but what you've done in the past and in the future as well. But in Lincoln's words, he said, "Determine that the thing can and shall be done, and then we shall find a way." And that is true as what happened today. What we're rededicating with regards to the Book of Interment Records. Michael Ellis had told me about it. He's a great director for Oak Ridge Cemetery, and he found this historic document that was handled not with care necessarily, but he knew the importance of it, and we appreciate his leadership in getting us to this point, and also Mr. Maki, all your good efforts in that. But it's really how we go from here. And as was pointed out, A lot of people probably don't realize that Lincoln's tomb wasn't the original resting place, it was the receiving vault. And so what we're trying to do is link all these pieces together from our past for our future so we can educate future generations. And that's what it's all about. And that's why it's important that we work together. And Katie Spindell brought a lot of partners together today, which we can't thank enough, and we will continue to work together so we can complete the picture of what Lincoln's legacy really has not only done back then, but also what it means to our future. Because when it comes to relationship building, Lincoln was number one. And you know, you go to the old state capitol, the House Divided speech, those words ring as true today as they did back then. And that's what it's all about. How do we come together as a group of people to make our community better? And by Springfield being better, it makes the state better, and it makes our country better, and it makes our world better, because we have a lot of world travelers that come here for one reason: Abraham Lincoln. And we just want to enhance that experience for everybody. So I'll allow the unveiling, but after this point in time, what's going to happen is it'll be at the Abraham Lincoln Library for those that will take an interest in the history, probably studying it. It'll be available from May 7th to May 17th, free, where individuals can come in and view the book. But also after that, we want to take proper care of it, so it'll be at the Abraham Lincoln Museum for the rest of May. But also after that point in time, it will be, they have a history of keeping Lincoln documents, so it will be handled with care and then brought out for special occasions in conjunction with partnership with Oak Ridge Cemetery. So again, thank you for coming out and recognizing this important piece of our history, but most importantly, not only where we've been, where we are today, but where we're going in the future together. So thank you for being part of it.
I probably owe him now. Before we go to the unveiling, because those friends of mine, supposedly, have mentioned the 2015 Lincoln funeral so often in today's event, what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is point out and actually have them kind of come forward. Some of those participants that we had on that day, one being Tom Christell. He was one of the clergy that spoke here. We have the 10th Illinois Volunteer Cavalry Regiment who were reactivated. And why I've taken this advantage here is because I have, since 2015, had very few opportunities where I can point a finger and say, they did this. If it hadn't been for they did this, that man right there, Ted Henry, we would never have had as many reenactors as we had. He organized it all, along with General Grant, whose name is Larry Whirlwind. And we have a man, Paul, would you step forward just a moment, please? I'm sure you realize he's not in regular clothing. These scarves, these sashes, and all of this is Paul Sweet. He was one of the pallbearers on that day. And this is how they looked in 2015, representing the Lincoln funeral. And several of those pallbearers were actually descendants of the originals. So thank you for coming all dressed up, because I know it's hot. Now, if I may, I'd like to ask the mayor to come back up to the front, as long as he doesn't mention my name. And I'd like Russ Maki and Director Lellis to come over and do the formal unveiling. Ladies and gentlemen, in honor of Abraham Lincoln and all who resided in this city in those years, let us see this book.
Revelation 21, verses 1 through 5. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his favor on you and give you his peace. Amen.